13.2 Contemporary Issues. When talking about football, one of the main topics that comes up is violence. Violence is behaviour involving physical force, intent to hurt, damage or kill someone or something. Mob football. The sport in medieval times was contested between two neighbouring towns with as many participants as can be on each side. The objective of this sport was simple: to carry an inflated pigskin ball to the end of the opponent's town. As odd as it may sound, the only rule of the sport was murder and manslaughter are strictly prohibited. Besides that, any means possible can be used to move the boards towards a destination. A mob football match still played today. The Royal Shove-Tie football is played in the streets of Ashbourne, Derbyshire, UK. The match, which is conducted annually, runs for 2 straight days. Drove of motor vehicles are prohibited, the ball cannot be hidden while it is being carried, and the course cannot lead through cemeteries or town memorial gardens. Unlike traditional matches, both teams try to move the ball towards their own goal. A goal is scored by tapping the ball 3 times on the team's own designated goal area. Violence in women's football has not been a well-known factor to occur in the sport. This is not to say that there is no violence in women's football at all. However, I'm saying that there is very less compared to other sporting events like men's football. Within men's football, violence has affected a wide range of people, including the players, fans, officials, and police forces. These players in football have been affected as the Euro 2000, the England fans were causing riots in the streets. This in turn led to English teams and clubs and national to be banned from European competition for 4 years. This affected players as it meant they were restricted to only being able to play domestic football, and the whole aim of many clubs is to only reach the top 5 and play European football. The fans and police force have been affected at equal levels in parallel with each other. This is because as fan trouble increases, the policing levels increase as well. Before, there used to be near to no policing at football matches. However, this encouraged the violence as it meant there was no one there to stop the fans from acting out. From this, more policing has been added through the 80s and 90s as to prevent the violence from getting out of hand. Nowadays, for heated games, supporters are always confined by the police from public transport to the stadium, so fans cannot break off and cause troubles. There is also an increase in policing around stadiums as so the fans don't leave their allocated sections to cause any trouble inside the grounds. The effect this has on the fans is that for casual fans, it makes the experience a lot safer and means that more people are inclined to go. However, for the police force, it uses up a large amount of police time and equipment every weekend where they could be doing more productive things rather than stopping football fans fighting. The reason why violence happens so much at football games, for men and women's, the cause of violence for football can come from frustration and could be from fans and players, with the opponent being better than the team or the opponents playing dirty and not getting punished for it. Frustration at the officials by not giving the correct calls that the players think they should, or even themselves at their own performance. Violence can also come from the players if the coach subs them off and they think they don't deserve for this to happen. And also some coaches are known to encourage violence. This can rile up players to be aggressive as well. which can lead on to possibly giving the club a bad name. Spectators can cause violence from the chants that are sung in the stands, as they can sometimes contain racist or homophobic language, which can cause players or opposing fans to take offence, as it can be very personal. Emotion of the game also causes violence. This is if it is a big game like a cup final against a big rival. These games have heightened tensions and could cause for emotions to spill over onto the pitch, causing violence. This goes for both fans and players and coaches. This is because fans want the bragging rights as so they can be happy with their team. Also, players get emotional because either they grew up watching and supporting the club, or because they're passionate for the fans. This means they'll put 100% in for the club, but can cause them doing irrational things like getting violent. Pressure can come from fans, the coaches, or even players' sponsors, as they expect them to perform well at every game, as it's their job to be able to show off the brand and make people believe that they are that good for the reason of using a specific brand. One way they can act through violence, as it is known to let off steam. Although violence is never a good thing to happen, there is a positive that can come out of it. The stadium, police and other groups can prepare for negative scenarios, so they are able to deal with them in a correct way. However, there are many more negatives to this violence occurring, how it does, with things like broken bones, losing jobs and even death in extreme cases, as some people did not know when to stop. This violence can also result in prison time if they get caught, and bans from stadiums all over the world. If people were banned from stadiums, this means that things might not be as bad because they want to go see the games. So this might be a way to try and reduce the chances of violence within football. Things have changed over time in football, with harsher sanctions being introduced for the players with their actions and the spectators causing and taking part in it. By doing this, it creates a deterrent from causing violence within the game. One of the main reasons for the violence in football one of the main catalysts for the violence in football levels dropping was the ban from the European competition for 4 years, as it did not affect individuals, clubs, but instead the whole country, made people realise that they did not need to be causing so much havoc all the time, and this led to violence dropping in football. Change has to happen, as in football violence was so prominent and linked with the support that they were going through hand in hand. This had to change, as if it did not change, it would start to get out of control at this point, and the men's sport would have to be abandoned by families or the casual viewer, as matches were too much of a risk to go. Within the women's game, there is not much violence compared to the men's. However, the women's games still take the precautions from what has happened in men's games and the trouble that has been caused in the men's games. There have been many initiatives introduced to help bring about change. These include factors like Kick It Out, which are there to stop aggressive, racist or homosexual abuse being used at football games and can be used at any stadium in Europe. and if there's an incident reported, it has to be investigated by the club or relevant authorities. Another initiative that clubs have put in place to help prevent fan violence is to keep the rowdy fans away from the other fans, so they cannot get to each other. They also have a split most well-known fans that can cause trouble. They can find it harder to get together and cause this. The FA also banned alcohol in the stands of the stadiums to stop drinking which can also sort of enhance violence within people, as they're not sort of conscious of what they're doing. They've also increased prices, so less people might not buy alcohol. They also have CCTV in all stadiums in the Women's Super League and Men's Football Leagues, so that any violence that does occur can be watched back and investigators can be involved and caught anyone and sanction them for this. These changes have a huge positive impact on the game, as violence levels have dropped since many of the introductions, showing that the FA and the law is introducing is actually working well. Racism. Another issue in sport is racism. Racism is the discrimination of people based on the colour of their skin and nothing else. A recent issue involving racism is when Bernardo Silva tweeted out a picture of Benjamin Mendy saying happy birthday, and also tweeted a picture of a cartoon black person with the caption of Guess Who. This raised controversy around the footballer, who then went on to say how he can no longer have a joke with his friends. There is now a huge debate over if the tweet was actually racist or not. However, the FA deemed it to be and served Silva with a 6-match ban as a punishment. There is a long and nasty history related with racism in football. It has been around for as long as history records it, and it's only recently that things have been getting better for those who have been affected by it. It was only in 1968, 42 years ago, that racial abuse in public was made illegal. However, even though it was in place, it was only in 1976, so 34 years ago, that the institution actually started taking action against those who did racial abuse in public, showing how bad the actual situation was back then. Racism in America was so bad that Jesse Owens came back from the 1936 Olympics as a national hero. He still had to use separate travel and accommodation from the rest of the white Olympic team because he was black and severely underpaid in his work life, resulted in having him to end up sailing Olympic medals to make enough money for his family. In recent times, the racial abuse of players in football has decreased enormously from past times, but is still very much prominent in the areas of the modern game. Peter Norman, in the photo on the slide, supported Black Power by wearing a badge that said Olympic Project for Human Rights, and was thereby told by the Australian officials in the 1968 Olympics that he was no longer allowed to represent Australia in any sport. Smith and Carlos, who were the other athletes, were told by Avery Brundage, who was the 5th president of the International Olympics Committee, that they would be banned from the US team and the Olympic Village, as their actions were said to be deliberate and a violent breach of fundamental principles of the Olympic spirit. The US Olympic Committee refused to do this, so Avery threatened to ban the US track team, so the two athletes